is the Chinwag Junkie Podcast. I'm your host, Joy Stone. Welcome to another episode.
My first job was actually just sweeping my dad's workshop out because he ran a small business manufacturing racing car parts. So that was the first job.
Oh,
but
nice.
Actually, I went off studying at university and I studied journalism at university. I graduated, I think it was 1999. I graduated and I went off and became a journalist for a few years. I had a period of time there where I thought I was going to go off and become a Catholic priest, but there was a little thing called celibacy which probably destroyed that, and also some family issues. They were against it. Obviously, mum and dad wanted grandkids. So anyway, I ended up going and working as a press secretary for a politician for a while. I went and took a few months off and travelled the world, came back, and I thought, well, I want to do something else with my life. So I ran for local government, which was a very foolish thing to do that resulted in me getting elected to local government at the age of 25. It was a part-time gig though, right? So you made, I think it was $30,000 a year or something, which is, quite frankly, even back then wasn't enough to, keep you going. So I was on the lookout for more work, but I eventually decided I was going to start a newspaper. So I did start a newspaper in concert with another woman who did the sales sort of side of things, and it was quite successful for a time while Mackay was in the middle of a mining boom. I ended up selling that newspaper to the other woman I'm referring to, and I sold it for not much because I had to get out of it because in the interim, all the councils in Queensland got amalgamated and there were new elections, and it went from being a part-time job as a local government councillor to a full-time job with a full-time wage. So I ran for re-election and I got elected. And then a couple of years later, I had thought about it. It's not like I didn't think about it, but I had decided not to do federal politics. But a couple of years later, I was pretty much hounded by a few people to put my hand up and run for the seat of Dawson. And so the insanity that got me into local government sort of extended a bit further, and I ended up nominating for the Liberal National Party and ended up being elected in the election of 2010. And that's like, politics is federal parliament and politics has consumed my life from that point on, I guess. And it really has been a bit of a blur in some respects. But I was re-elected again in 2013. I was re-elected again in 2016, re-elected again in 2019, and now I'm bowing out. And whatever the future holds, the future holds. In that period of time, I met my now wife. Actually, in that period of time, I had a girlfriend, and she left, and then I met my wife a bit later.
We've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. I met my my now wife, and we now have a 19-month-old daughter. So that's obviously part of the next chapter beyond federal parliament. But the interesting thing, Jai, a lot of people think these days that politicians, when they leave office, they're right, they're fine. I wish I had $1 for every person that told me I'd be right on the parliamentary pension, because if I had $1 for every person that told me that, I'd have a nice retirement package. But mate, just like everyone else, we've got to go off and get another job because there's no more parliamentary pensions. That ended back in 2004 for MPs that were elected after 2004.
Right.
So, I have superannuation like everyone does. So if you were elected before 2004, you will still get it. And so that the reason for that is, I guess, that when someone got elected to Parliament before 2004, they were elected knowing that this was the package that they were going to get.
Yeah.
And they've actually had to contribute some funds into that special sort of retirement account. And because they've contributed the funds, I think legally there's probably no way that the government could say it's over, because it's like a contract that's been entered into. But basically that all come to an end. Mark Latham campaigned on it. Mark Latham, who was the Labor leader, opposition leader at that time, is now a One Nation member of Parliament, which is such a big shift. But he campaigned on it, and John Howard accepted it, and John Howard was the one who scrapped that for new MPs that were elected after 2004. So, if you think your MP's on a good wicket for the rest of life, think again.
Well, there you go. That is honestly, that is brand new information for me. I didn't know that. I thought get into government and it's all smooth sailing. Doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah. For some, mate.
For some, yes.
Others,
well, that is
so
a big.
much.
That is a big difference for some. I know our.
And beyond that, for some suck up to industry groups and different organisations, and when they go out, they end up getting parachuted onto the board of some company, or being picked up by some university,
and it doesn't matter how they left government.
Yeah. So these things are gotten by some MPs, but it's the MPs who are the very polite and prim and proper and diplomatic people who work the system that end up getting those sort of lucrative gigs.
Yes. Wow. I seen you went to convoy to Canberra, down the protest down there.
Wore the shirt.
Yeah. How was it? How was
Mate,
it?
It was good. That had to be the biggest protest rally that I've seen in Canberra in the 11 years that I've been going there as a member of Parliament. And that's that sort of view. People might think, oh well, he's completely biased because he's all against these mandates anyway. But that view was shared by a reporter by the name of Chris Ullman, who said that it was the largest gathering in Canberra that he's seen in 30 years that he's been reporting on national politics. So something was going on there, mate. Like, there was a lot of people who were coming to have their voice heard. And sadly, the mainstream media and others tried to belittle it, denigrate it, say that it wasn't as big as what it was, say that it was full of fringe dwellers. Well, it was huge. Yeah. I don't know the numbers, but this was huge. If it was a football crowd, it would have been sold out and then some. And the people who were there were not fringe dwellers. They were people from all walks of life. I met graziers from out the back of New South Wales. I met brickies from Sydney. Mm-hmm. I met nurses. I met doctors. I met policemen. I met ambos. I met teachers. I met people from all walks of life. And sadly, all those people in those professions that I've just mentioned, they had something written on their back. They wrote on their back their profession, so nurse, the number of years they've been there, 15 years, and sacked. So they've all lost their jobs. And
yesterday's heroes, right?
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that. Once upon a time, it was like, well, these people, they're doing such a good job for our community, and now next thing, these horrible anti-vaxxers, they're crazy, get rid of them.
Yeah.
This is just wrong. You take away someone's livelihood. It's not just, they can go and get another job. What job are they going to get now? What job?
Well,
I mean, you need, there's so many different careers now where the government's requiring vaccination status to actually work in that field. And then there's other professions. Like today, I had Dalrymple Bay Coal Terminal write back to me to say that they are still going to proceed with basically a no vaccination, no worksite entry policy.
Really?
So it's basically a no jab, no job policy. And as a
result, BHP has got something similar to that too.
They've let or about to let 700 workers go.
Yeah.
And down at this Dalrymple Bay Coal Terminal, they're about to let, I think, somewhere between 80 and 90 workers and contractors will be affected by that decision, and they'll lose their jobs. These are people who have worked all their life, either studied or worked hard to get where they are. They're paying off bills with this. They've got fixed debts, mortgages, got families to feed. and they're basically now being chucked onto the scrap heap, and it is so wrong. And I don't understand. I don't understand why anyone's doing it, but I don't understand why right now any private corporation would move in this direction when the rest of the world seems to be trending in another direction. And it's obvious. Blind Freddie can see the fact that COVID's going away.
Yeah.
The show's over.
Yeah.
The audience has nearly all walked out of the theatre. The lights are being dimmed. The curtains are closing, but the actors are still up on the stage playing it out. And you think to yourself, well, guys, someone needs to get the old, crook and pull them off and say it's over, it's done. We're closing the theatre down.
Look, I've always thought that allowing people to choose to do something or not, and then bringing in a mandate for those that choose basically incorrectly, that's not freedom. And I like to think that I'm very freedom orientated. Like, I don't care what you do, just don't make me do it as well, right? But taking away the rights for non-compliance is like, that's how prison works. And that's definitely, that would be the opposite, the absolute opposite of what freedom is meant to be, right? Sure. So that's the way I see it. I don't. If a private business genuinely wanted their workforce vaccinated, then you go for it. But it's when these businesses they got pushed into it. Basically, there's no other way to put it. They got pushed into it, and now the craziness of it has gotten hold, and we're gonna have real problems in the future, both with people's mental issues. There's gonna be economic issues down the track. I mean, all Western countries at the moment are trending towards inflation, and I can't say that Australia is going to be immune from that. Probably not. But yeah, that's what I think on that. It was crazy to start with, and it's still crazy to me.
Well, there's another thing with it too, Joe, and that is the fact that some people might laugh at a Liberal National Party politician pointing this out, but workers' rights, workers' rights. We have now employers having the ability to say to a worker, you must have this particular medical procedure done in order to continue working here. Well, look, I get it. I get it where you have gone into a line of work and that is the requirement before you've joined. Like, for instance, in the meat industry, Q fever, it is an issue. It's an issue that contaminates, can contaminate the meat, can cause issues. So they say, if you want to work here, you have to have the Q fever inoculation, right?
The difference is, though, sorry, I just got to interrupt real quick. The difference is the Q fever vaccine does what the Q fever vaccine is meant to do, right? That's it vaccinates. That's a big part of it as well too.
Completely agreed, mate. But the principle also is that before you go and work in an industry what you're signing up to, to be working in that industry, and then have the employer say, well, actually, in order to keep your job, you now have to have this other jab, which got no long-term safety data. That's certainly got efficacy issues. All the rest of it. There's adverse events that are reported as a result of it. The question is, how legally does that employer have a right to impose that on you when that wasn't part of your original employment conditions? And I think, it's going to take time, and it shouldn't take time. What should happen right now is that governments, state and federal, should act to drop all of this, to push for reinstatement of employees and compensation for employees that have lost their jobs as a result of these no jab, no job mandates. But they won't do that. I don't think they're going to do that. It's going to take time, but eventually a court of law will probably, or Fair Work Commission will hear something and they will crack this nut, and it will all be over, and it will be over in the blink of an eye, I suspect. But that's not to say that we shouldn't keep the pressure on governments of all persuasions.
For sure.
My message is reinstate and compensate.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, if reinstate and compensate don't work, then litigate.
Well, yeah. But, well, I think in a reasonable world, lockdowns and all the mandates. Let's look all the mandates. As soon as there were studies proving that they didn't work, they should have been dropped. Like there's the John Hopkins study showing that that lockdowns only reduced COVID by 0.2%.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
It had plenty of other problems that associated with that. Mask mandates, like it's mainstream news now. It's all over the corporate media news that these surgical face masks don't work. Yeah, Queensland still has a fucking face mask. Like it's coming off. Yes, don't get me wrong.
Until the 4th of March, mate. The virus is magically going to get a message on the 4th of March that COVID-19 can no longer go near people's mouths because it's so virulent today that we need the mask on to stop it from getting in there. But on the 4th of March, it's getting the memo from the Premier that it needs to stay away from the mouth. It's crap, mate. It's crap because nothing's going to change on the 4th of March. Quite frankly, if the 4th of March is a day we can take them off, then today is the day we can take them off. Last week was the day we could take them off. In fact, probably a year ago was the day that we shouldn't have had to put them on. And that's the reality, mate.
I completely agree.
I get in trouble for saying masks don't work. I don't get in trouble for saying what I'm about to say here. Mask mandates don't work.
Mask mandates do not work.
And I've seen stories in newspapers that right now have become cheer squads for mask mandates, and those stories hark back to the first instance of SARS, which is this is what it is, SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-1, SARS-1. There were people who were selling masks and selling masks with certain claims with those masks, and they were getting in trouble. There were crackdowns through trade practices law that basically said if you make a claim about a mask being working, being efficacious and effective against this particular virus, you're going to be in trouble because it lasted something like 20 minutes.
And it carried, I believe, I know what you're talking about there. I believe it was $110,000 fine for each infringement. That was only a handful of years ago. The narrative's just been flipped on its head. It's crazy.
The sad thing is that we've all, even I've had to comply. I've had to comply like everyone else. They're fining us, and it's just so wrong. That's why if I have to wear a mask these days, it says this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. So why do you think the corporate press went with the narrative that they did? Why do you think that? Does the federal government, what am I trying to ask you? Does the federal government own the media, or is it the other way around?
No, certainly. Well, I can't say either way, but certainly, sadly, it seems that the remit of politics dances to the tune of the mainstream media far, far too much. Why did the media go that way? It is a very, very good question that I would like to really know the answer to. I can speculate. On
that's
a number
what this show's all about.
Mate, I suggest one is the fact that if you dig really deep in terms of who owns a lot of the mainstream media networks, in Australia, yes, but more so in the USA, there's links to people who also sit on the board of pharmaceutical companies. I talked to a friend about this and I said to him, I just can't fathom what it is. And he said to me, the Australian media have largely followed the US media, which went down this road. It went down this road because COVID and the pandemic may have been seen to be politicised in the US, where Donald Trump was advocating certain alternative approaches and not going so hard. And so the media criticised him, a lot for that, because the media over there hated Trump. And so they took oh no, this is really serious. We've got to lock down and mask up and separate and, vax up and all the rest of it. So they took that approach, and the Australian media largely just looked to their American cousins and said, well, we're going to follow what they're doing. That probably does sound believable to an extent, although the issue is there's been editorial stances that have been taken. There's been corporate stances that have been taken. For instance, more than one, media organisations in this country have vaccine mandates privately imposed upon their workers. So how can you have any sense of non-bias in your reporting when, as a private company, you are requiring your workers to be vaccinated without any government mandate? You've picked a side already, and that actually should be declared by most media organisations when they're reporting on this. They should say, our conflict of interest is that we have mandated this in our company.
For sure.
Without the government pressuring us to do so, because it shows absolutely there's a corporate bias towards this matter.
Yeah.
But, whatever the reason why they've gone down this track, and the politicisation, I just touch on this again.
Yeah.
Even in Australia, it's sort of been seen as a left versus right issue, when it's not really. It's not at all. This is about, I disagree with that way that's been stylised. I've seen many people who are supposedly from the left that have been standing alongside me saying, I've hated you for most of your political career, but now I really like you, because you're saying the same thing as me on this, which is the most important issue. Forget the rest of it. It's important because of our freedoms and our human rights. So I think the mainstream media, though, is decidedly left-wing. They are decidedly elitist. They think they know better than all the rest of us. And
For sure.
They have decided to take a stance that looks down their nose at the people who are questioning what so-called experts have to say in this field. And that's incredibly disappointing as someone who was a former journalist, because the one thing that you are supposed to do is question. You are supposed to interrogate the information that's given to you, not just simply accept it at face value and go after other people who are asking questions. The fact is that so many people are asking questions, I think because a lot of people in the mainstream media have just walked off that field when they were the ones that should have been asking. I give some exceptions. I give an exception to Chris Orman. He has asked a lot of questions about this. I give an exception to, I'm talking about Australia here. I give an exception to, and my mind's just slipped. There's a journalist at the Australian, and his name will come to me in a moment. But there's a journalist at the Australian who's done a hell of a lot of work in this area. Adam Crichton. Sorry, I should have remembered that. Lee Sales has slowly decided to speak out against a lot of the stuff that's going on as well. Very interesting, someone from the ABC. And there's probably a few others as well in the mainstream press. But the interesting thing is that, Jai, this is seen, this deficiency, this lack of questioning, like walking off the field that the mainstream media has done, has led, I think, exponentially to the rise of alternative media in Australia, whereas before there wouldn't have been much. You've got videographers like Real Rukshan, who he's out there filming live and showing people another side of the story. So you go from that sort of videography work through to Rebel News, who have a footprint here, Cauldron Pool, who do a lot of opinion. The Spectator is putting alternative views up. The Good Source. There are now a range of platforms where people have alternate news and views that Australians can avail themselves of. And I think that that's very important because we've seen the media trend in the one direction for a long, long while, and particularly around COVID. And what we need is a democratisation of media in this country, so more voices are heard than just that one sort of groupthink that seems to go on in that profession.
Rukshan was the highlight for me because, you know, when he was down there in Melbourne and he's not saying anything, he's just showing video of what's happening. He walks up and, you know, a couple of people, he might ask a couple of questions, but there's no opinion in there. There's nothing. It's just all from the people on the ground.
Correct.
They say their bit, they're not interrupted, and there's just video, and that's it. And
he's condemned by the mainstream for being a right-wing radical white supremacist.
yes, it's crazy. And yet I remember they'd done a hit piece on him, and I think they dragged Ari into it as well. But Ari, Avi, I think they dragged him into it as well. But you know, the reason that Rukshan really stood out for me is for the reasons I just said. It wasn't his opinion. It was just what was happening. It was just the video, the raw footage of live streaming onto Facebook. And there was literally tens of thousands of people tuning into that. And I don't think that the corporate media world liked that at all. No,
they don't, because they like to just show little snippets like the guy that allegedly punched the horse.
That was great,
and you saw the photos and the videos, and then you saw video, and I don't know whether it was from Rukshan or who it was, but then you saw video from the crowd.
I think that was just a random phone, but yeah, I do know the one you're talking about.
And so it was clear that he didn't punch the horse. He pushed the horse because the horse was going to strike him. Now he pushed it, not punched it. But we see, and I, like someone who's come from the conservative side of things, I can remember studying sociology, which was such a left-wing subject at university. I liked it, but on the other hand, I hated it because it was just so left-wing. And I've been very pro-police, right? And you know, I remember this image in the textbook. It was like a cartoon they lifted from somewhere, and it had a photo of well, not a photo, it was a cartoon, as I said, but it had the newspaper headline, and it was the guy who was beating the police, bashing the police, and that was the headline. And then what they were showing is the photographer photographing this guy who was pushing back against the police. Meanwhile, over here was 5 police officers bashing 2 people with batons, and of course the implication was that the media only films when or only takes the photo of the person doing something bad against the authority. They'll never show you the other side of the story. And I remember getting angry at that cartoon, thinking that's crap. This is not how it works. Like, I can remember having those thoughts. Now it's like 25 years later, and I'm seeing it in reality. And you're like, wow, that textbook was right. And guess what?
Holy
I bet
shit.
the people who wrote that bloody textbook would probably be cheering on the police.
Probably.
For doing that stuff. And look, I shouldn't say the police, because it's not all police, right? I still have great respect for coppers, for men and women that put on the uniform. For the large part, I think they go out to protect us. They go out to service. But I tell you what, there's been a lot of trust and respect that has been lost, sadly, for that profession, because during the course of this pandemic, when there's been peaceful demonstrations in cities and the police have been deployed by governments to deal with those peaceful demonstrations, to actually stop them, I think that people have just thought, the police have become really politicized now. And the buck stops in that, obviously, with the government. But below the government, the buck sort of stopped with the commissioner. Like if I was the commissioner of the Victoria Police and Daniel Andrews or his police minister was to come to me and say, well, boys, there's a demonstration today in the city. It's not allowed. We want you to go out and send your people out there to stop it and shut it down. I would have said respectfully, sir, that isn't going to happen. I will have my men and women out there, and if there's any violence, we'll deal with the violence.
Yes.
But we're not going to stop any peaceful demonstration.
No.
We're not going to stop peaceful demonstration.
No.
That's what he should have said. Instead,
completely agree
they
with
sent
you.
the riot squads out there and they fired projectiles on people. They did everything that I would think a police force should not be doing against its own citizens. And so this is part of the problem we've seen over in the US, the rise of the militarization of police forces. And my worry is we're starting to see that here.
Well, I've seen the heavy armored vehicles, on Rukshan's live feed.
Scary stuff. I mean, this is army type vehicles, military type vehicles
against the unarmed population.
We see too many videos coming out of the US where there's trigger happy police officers that just shoot first, ask questions later. I mean, I saw this horrendous video, and it just shows you when the police are built up to have a view, and it's not the police officer's fault, it's the system's fault. When it's instilled into the police that you are now in a war against the civilians, which I'm sure is how it was drummed into them during the course of this pandemic with the people on the street protesting.
For sure.
You end up with situations like what I saw where an unarmed guy in a hotel was called out of his hotel room, told to be on the ground, don't move, and if you move in the wrong way, we're going to do something. And he was that nervous, he accidentally moved in the wrong way, he was unarmed, and they riddled him full of bullets. And that's the sort of outcome that happens from a system taking an us versus them approach to policing. And it shouldn't be allowed. It should not be allowed in this country, but we're seeing it creep in. We're seeing a lot of things creep in that have never happened in this country. And I'm afraid we're going to see more and more of it unless people stand up. Invasion of privacy, rights being whittled away. The fact is that bulk of the population, Jai, have said to governments pretty much that they're happy to sacrifice the liberties and freedoms that, over 100,000 men in this country died for in world wars, and they're happy to sacrifice it for a little bit of security.
What do you know about the digital ID?
Yeah, I know a bit about it. I know that it's bad.
That out of all of the COVID regime, that is, I feel like, the one thing they're going to try and hold on to. And I don't mean vax pass. I mean its future iteration where your complete health records tied to this thing, and your bank account could be tied to this thing, and it sounds like conspiracy or whatever, but once the technology and the infrastructure's there, it's not hard to make those things a reality. And judging by the last 2 years, it seems like at least at a state level, they'd be willing to do that.
And once upon a time, particularly Queensland, when Joh Bjelke-Petersen was the Premier, that people criticised for his sort of human rights approaches and crackdown on marches. But I tell you what, he fought like blue blazes against the idea of an Australia card.
Yeah.
And you and I are both too young to recall that, but there was a proposal that there was going to be a national identification system that have a card. All your details will go onto the card. The government will know everything about you from this card. And people went off their heads about it, and it got dropped. Well, now we're going back to that, but it's even worse because this is online. This is a digital identity card of which so much data can be captured, more than would just be on an ID card. So much data is going to be captured, perhaps even biometric data. Who knows? And who is it going to be shared with, and for what purposes is this going to be used?
Who has the control?
Why are we going
over
to have it? Who in fact asks for this? I mean, I've been a politician for 11 years now.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that not one day Has anyone stopped me in the street, sent me an email, phoned me, come to my office and said, George, I want you to introduce a national digital identification system? It just hasn't happened. So who's pushing it? Who's pushing it? And I'll tell you who's pushing it. Who's pushing it is the World Economic Forum. That's just simply a fact. The World Economic Forum has pushed for a digital identification system to be rolled out around the world. With these sort of things, it comes with loss of privacy. It doesn't matter how many protections you are going to build into this digital identification platform. Those protections, there will be workarounds, there will be breaches, and there eventually will be watering down of those protections. So if there is one fight, you're right, Jai, one fight we've got to be in to stop, it is this bloody national ID system.
Yeah. But it's all of those things, absolutely. But at the bare minimum, look at the census site come census time. The government can't keep that site open while everyone logs on and tries to fill out their census, and not even everyone does it online. Imagine if there's 25 million people all with this digital ID, and there'd be hundreds, if not thousands, of transactions happening, millions and millions of transactions happening all at the same time. There's no way that it's going to be stable at just at the very surface level of it. It's never going to work.
A huge issue with potential hacking of that data. So I don't know how they're going to do it. But look, the good news is, and there's two bits of good news here. One, I had a conversation last week with someone senior in the ministry that's looking after this particular area of digital identity, and they told me the government's not moving forward on it, at least before the election.
So this is federal government.
Right, let me be clear, at least before the election, right? So there is no chance this side of June or July we're going to see that legislation move forward. Now after the election is a different matter, okay?
Yes.
So there's two things that come after that. We need people in the Senate to protect us from this. I'm firm on that, whether that doesn't matter what political party they're in. I want people in the Senate, whether they're bloody Labor, LNP, Independent, crossbenchers, minor parties, whatever, they're going to be there and they're going to be against this stuff. And you think, well, there's no hope if the government wants it. Let me tell you about a little something called the $10,000 cash ban. So there was a proposal going back a few years ago that they were going to ban transactions of cash over the $10,000 limit. Now, I was against this, and so are a lot of other people. Now, against it for many, many reasons. The potential precursor to the introduction of a digital transaction scheme where our transactions could be controlled, getting rid of cash altogether. All of that stuff is where this potentially could lead to. But even just at the low level, cash, a $20 note, a $10 note, or a 50-cent coin or a dollar coin, that's legal tender.
Yep.
That's why the coins carry the image of the Queen on the back of it. The notes say it's been issued by the Reserve Bank of Australia, under direction of the Crown. So this is legal tender. This is what you and I trust in to be able to be sure that we're not getting gypped, that, it's a piece of paper, a piece of bloody plastic, or a bit of metal. It's probably completely worthless, to be quite honest.
But it's backed by something. It's meant to be backed by something, right?
Exactly. We both trust in it that is going to be worth the paper it's written on, or worth the plastic, or the metal it's imprinted on. So, mate, it's legal tender, and if you abolish legal tender for any transaction, doesn't matter the value of it, you've effectively said that's no longer legal tender for that, and something else now must become legal tender. So what's the legal tender? Well, it's an electronic transfer, and that's owned by a private corporation called a bank, and it could be a foreign bank. So here's the government effectively legislating to say that all legal tender over $10,000 is now going to be in the hands of a private corporation that's going to make money off that transaction. Well, that's crap.
It definitely is crap.
It's now become, scarily enough, the future that we're having, where big government and big business seem to get fused together for the benefit of both of them, control and profits. And that scares me a lot. But
How do we
getting back to the $10,000 cash ban just quickly?
right.
We opposed it. We went against it. There are a lot of people who were saying they didn't support it. At the end of the day, it got all too hard and the government dropped it. So these things can be broken. You know, we can stop the national ID system, but we just need persistence and we need a lot of voices.
Yeah, we do. We need to definitely get more people on board with that. So I was going to ask you something, but I've forgotten. So anyways,
sorry, mate, I talked too long.
No, that's completely okay.
National ID, cash ban, where have we gone?
I don't know.
Can't remember?
I don't know.
Okay.
Your censorship bill. How's it going?
Social media, big tech.
How is it going? Has it been received by the public, other members in Parliament? Is it? How's it going?
Well, I had two other members in Parliament that were keen to second it. The member for White Bay, Lou O'Brien, wanted to second it, but Bob Catter jumped to his feet, and the member for Kennedy and got there first. So it had some support on the day. Look, the reality is, I'm not going to gild the lily. It will just simply sit on the table now until the wind up of Parliament, because it needs support of the government to bring it on for a vote, and it won't get that support. But the point was to show that indeed a law can be drafted that deals with this issue. And this issue is an important issue because it's about censorship and it's about stifling free speech. It's about stifling philosophical, social, cultural, and political discourse in this country. These social media platforms that are all run by foreign corporations, that they have now become the new town square where ideas and exchanges go on.
Yeah.
And so for a private foreign corporation to be in control of what's said on that platform, it's very, very dangerous. I have no problems if it's unlawful, right? If it's unlawful, take it off. If it's incitement to violence, take it off.
But when it's a challenging idea,
take it off. If it's a challenging idea, that's a different. There is a very big difference, it's been said, between hate speech and speech that you hate.
Yes, that's perfect. I like that.
If you are going to say, I want Jai Stalin killed, that's unlawful. If I say, Jai Stalin, I don't like his beard, that's an opinion.
You'd be wrong too.
I would be wrong because both their beards are magnificent.
Yeah.
And this is a thing that big tech. Let me give a real explicit example. The Prime Minister of this country had his posts removed from WeChat, which happens to be a Chinese social media site that is under the control, obviously, of the Chinese Communist Party. That happened in our country, though, taken down in our country. So how is it? I think there was outrage when that happened. We can see how bad that is. We haven't acted on it, though. But if we can see how bad that is, we should act on it. And if we can see how bad it is when WeChat does it, we should also see how bad it is when Twitter does it, or Facebook does it, or YouTube does it. And they should all be dealt with. And my bill was saying that this should be an illegal act. If it's lawful communication, it should be allowed to happen on a platform. And people run the argument, they're private corporations, they can do what they want. Yeah, they're private corporations, but hang a tick, they're not publishers. They say they're not publishers, they're platforms. And because they're not publishers, they're not subject to defamation cases. And if they want to be publishers and curate their content and censor things and edit things, then they've got to be liable for defamation as well. They can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
So if they're a platform, they're a platform. Allow every bit of free speech apart from that which is unlawful. And that's what the bill basically said, and it gave you and I and everyone else the outlet to go off to a government agency, Australian Media and Communications Authority, and say, I've been censored, here's what happened. They would have a look and they would give the platform 24 hours or 48 hours, I think it was, to remedy the breach. And if they didn't remedy it, like put the person's post back or put the person back online, then that company would be fined $1 million.
Seems fair. To me, it does. I'm completely with you all there. like you said, they are the town square. They're the soapbox, if you will, of today's age. And it'd be the same as if Telstra decided to cut off your phone or censor your phone calls.
100%. 100%. That you have just said the most insightful analogy that there is. This is now a form of communication. And would we accept, because you and I having a conversation, I'm on Telstra, by the way, I don't know what you're on, but I'm on Telstra.
Same.
But okay, so if Telstra didn't like what we were talking about right now, would it be acceptable if Telstra was able to reach in and sever the communication link, sever the internet line?
If you look at it from the social media standpoint, yes, it is, which is crazy. It's not. I want to make that clear. It's definitely not. But that's.
But I think most Australians would say that Telstra should not be able to do that.
Yeah, I would agree.
So
absolutely.
So why is Facebook allowed to do it?
Yeah.
Why is Twitter allowed to do it? Why is YouTube allowed to do it?
Completely agree. So, all right, I'm going to let you go, but
thanks, John.
How do we get out of what we're in now? Like all the crap that's going on. Oh, actually, before you go,
yes.
The CHO's extension in power as a Queenslander. What do you reckon?
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was so bizarre because I was on the road yesterday and I didn't get the news until too late, and people were asking me questions, and I said to them, well, these emergency powers run out on the 26th of March, so I'm not sure what they're going to do, but what I'm worried about is they're going to introduce a bill like Daniel Andrews did. And then someone goes, no, they've announced it this morning. And I went, what? And they had a look. Yeah, okay, here we go. So they're saying they're going to extend these powers until October. And I bet my bottom dollar there's going to be several extensions that they allow themselves in there. But mate, the show is over. As I said, the audience are walking out. If not, they've nearly all left. The lights are being turned off. The curtains are being drawn. But the actors are still playing this out on stage. It all needs to stop. I mean, COVID is now a fizzer. It is a complete and utter fizzer. We know what it is. We've got people like the former Deputy Chief Health Officer, Nick Coatsworth, who's out there saying that this variant of COVID we've got, Omicron, is no worse than the flu. No worse than actually not the flu, the common cold. So if this is the case, and it is, the stats show it. I mean, the ABS data that was released the other day that showed a number of things, including that only about 83 Australians without any underlying health conditions actually died of COVID-19. It showed that overall there was something like 2,600 deaths over the course of about 18 months, whereas in a pandemic, in an ordinary year, there's about 2,000 or so people who die of influenza and pneumonia. So ordinary 12-month year, a bit over 2,000 die of influenza and pneumonia. Over the course of over 18 months, there are something like 2,600 that died of COVID-19. It's very comparable, very, very comparable. And then you look at the age of deaths, something like 81, I think it was, for men. I could be wrong on that number. It might be 83, but whatever it was, there was a particular age of death, average age of death for COVID-19 victims, if I can call them that, for men, and it was about 85.1 for women. And then if you have a look at the average life expectancy for men, it was exactly the same as the number for COVID deaths. And the average life expectancy for women was 85. So those women who died of COVID-19 were actually getting 0.1 of a year longer to live on average than most Australian women. That's not to say that any death's not tragic. It is.
No,
it is.
And that's another media thing.
Perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Of course. You want grandma to die? No, I don't want grandma to die. I mean, but you got to put things in perspective. A headline that a 90-year-old woman has died is not news. The headline should be a 90-year-old woman is still alive. I mean, that's the headline. But we've lost the plot on this. It's like, there's two things that are certain in life: death and taxes. And once you get past a certain age, eventually you're going to die of old age. or pneumonia, which is what a lot of old people die of. In fact, I'm told by some doctors that pneumonia used to be referred to as the old person's friend because they'd become weak and bedridden, and flu season would come along and then they'd die, they'd pass. It was sort of time to go and meet the maker. And that'll happen to us all, you and I included. Mate, I've lost my track here.
No, that's
okay. We're talking about how it's all going to end. How it's all going to end is unless the media and the politicians and all the sort of globalist groups out there can manufacture some other scare, fear campaign, crisis, and spook us all back under the doona, this thing will have to logically and rationally end because people are seeing it for themselves. It may take time. There's probably going to be some more destruction done. There's probably going to be people's lives that are impacted by the continuation of having lost their job and lost their career or profession. But this thing will come to an end. But mate, what we can't do is be silent about it and just hope it comes to an end. Only because we are speaking out and saying this is crap, enough's enough, and we're ridiculing the situation, I believe, are some of these restrictions coming to an end.
For sure. I think so too. Like, they're not going to publicly say that on 7 nightly news about the freedom rallies and all this sort of thing having a profound impact on government restrictions and whatnot. But I do believe they are changing. Like, imagine if everyone just said, "Yeah, okay, this is what we're doing." Everywhere would be like Canada at the moment, and it would never change.
Yep.
But anyways,
moving on to the next thing. The next thing in the cycle is, Russia. So
yes,
there's always something new, and perhaps the only good thing about the whole the Russia situation will be that it bloody gets COVID off the news and out of our lives, so that not COVID, but the government restrictions around COVID, so that we can move on and be free again. I really do hope that's going to be the case, and I hope that all of those people who've lost their work, they get it back. They get reinstated and compensated for their loss.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I hope to talk to you soon. Oh, and
cheers, mate.
Where do we sorry. Where do we find you?
Where do you find you? All of them, mate. I've got the long list up on my Substack, nationfirst.substack.com.
Yep.
I'm on Facebook, YouTube, Parler, Gab, Twitter, Getter, Rumble, Telegram, all of them.
Me
you
too.
Find the full list there.
Me too. Yeah, that's good. And you've got a podcast as well. Conservative
I
One,
do,
mate.
It's called? Conservative One, yep. And you can find those details by going to your favourite podcast outlet and type in Conservative One, and it's still up there. Hasn't been censored yet.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much.